My name is Ejfa Bernstein. I'm a rabbi and a writer, and I founded the first National Jewish Environmental Organization in 1988, and that was called Shomrei Adama, which means Keepers of the Earth. And in that organization, we developed a whole ecological foundation for how to think about the Bible and Jewish texts and our relationship to nature from a Jewish perspective. And I ran that organization for about 10 years. And then I went on my own and began just writing and teaching independently on Judaism, the Bible, and ecology. And I continue to do that today. I've written several books. The first was called Let the Earth Teach You Torah. It was the first curriculum on Judaism and ecology, and I've written several other books, chief among them, The Splendor of Creation, and most recently, A Passover Haggadah, which is a guide to a Passover Seder from an ecological perspective, and that's called The Promise of the Land. And I continue to write and teach and speak on the intersection of Bible and ecology and Judaism still today. My spiritual philosophy really is my work. From the time I was a very young person, I was very aware that everything was interconnected, that the plants, the animals, our atmosphere, the earth, myself, that there was this, that we lived in total interdependence. And so that's kind of this sort of ecological framework of everything being interconnected is the beginning of my spiritual philosophy. And then when I rediscovered Judaism in my early 20s, I was really taken by the whole idea, the concept of God as one, as really mirroring the kind of ecological philosophy that I already had. So the primary, what we call the watchwords of Jewish faith are Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And any child, any Jewish child hears that over and over again. And for me, what I focused on in that understanding is that God is one, God is the oneness, God is the oneness of all creation. And that totally mirrored everything that I already believed about the interconnectedness of the earth and all its creatures and inhabitants. So that's sort of the beginning point of my spiritual philosophy. And then as I began to study more and more, it just became more and more clear to me how ecologically focused Judaism and actually the Bible is, the Hebrew Bible. The creation in the Bible is God's first revelation. It's the first way we get to understand God is through all of nature. And that's always been this very profound piece of wisdom for me. Everything that's created, every single aspect of nature, all the processes of the natural world, everything is individually called good, or it can also be translated as beautiful. And so just living in a world that we understand, the tradition understands to be good and beautiful, the obvious role for people in this world is to take care of this incredible gift that's been given to us. And one other piece of this that I just want to say is that God is understood metaphorically through rocks and mountains and through the air and the waters, and all of that's been very important to me in my life. And the first way that we actually encounter God in the Bible is as Ruach Elohim, which means the breath or the wind of God. And the whole idea of God in the wind or the breath or the atmosphere has always been a critical motivating fact for me, and incredibly profound in terms of both climate change and the pandemic. Just thinking about God being everywhere in the air. And this is just an idea that is continually motivates me in my work. What's most compelling in the new ideas about climate change are actually not new, but really the most ancient technologies, which have to do with gardening and really taking care of the earth through things like regenerative agriculture. To me, turning back to all of these technologies that Native peoples have known, that our peoples have known since early times when we lived much closer to the land, all those technologies are absolutely critical today, and we've just gotten very far away from them. So, and we all know that one of the ways of approaching climate change is through regenerative agriculture and healthy farming and gardening techniques, because the earth sequesters carbon, and it's a carbon sink. And so the more that we're practicing good gardening and farming practices, the more carbon we're able to draw down from the earth. And there's lots of wonderful community gardens and farms that are happening all over the United States that are very inspiring to me. You may have heard of Soul Fire Farm, which is doing great work in upstate New York. And there's a bunch of Jewish farms these days. Abundance Farm in my neighborhood, and Coastal Roots Farm in California. And I'm sure there's lots and lots of farms coming from other religious perspectives as well. But the whole movement of community gardens and farms and growing crops and vegetables on synagogue and church properties is so exciting to me, not just from a climate perspective, but also from a pandemic perspective, because what's happening in the pandemic is our supply chains are all fouled up, and we're unable to get the food we need, and people don't have money to be paying for things these days anyway, and to be able to grow our own food and to have synagogues and churches and mosques and all different kinds of religious institutions use their properties to grow food. It's just part of the beautiful and, to me, godly cycle of life, and to be able to participate in that is really profound. So any projects that have to do with regenerative agriculture seem to me to be the most important things that we can be doing as individuals and groups. Changes that need to happen in our world, or in the world of religion and ecology. Some of the things that are most important to me that really have not been done yet is to really integrate an ecological perspective into all of the curricula in seminaries, in any place of learning that has to do with religion. I think in all religions, ecology is a fundamental piece that we have just completely overlooked. And there's so much background, there's so much that's intellectually interesting about ecology, and theologically interesting, that has to do with God, that we should be integrating all of this into our curricula. And not just the academic curriculum, but also the activities that people participate in, what's considered viable social justice projects in synagogues, churches, and seminaries. There's just, for every individual out there, there is a way of connecting with the environment in a way that's meaningful for you, whoever you are, whatever your interests are. It's just figuring out a way into this realm so that you feel moved from the inside, as opposed to feeling like someone's telling you what to do. I just really believe that the natural world is full of inspiration, and we just each need to find our own way into that inspiration, so that will help guide us in our lives. But I really feel that it's been too absent in seminaries, and I think that we could be doing so much more. Instead of saying, oh, we don't have the money to do this, we don't have the money to start a program in ecology. And, we're seeing that these institutions are dealing with a pandemic, and they're still, making exceptions and figuring out ways to make things work during the pandemic. Well, the environment is the source. Environmental problems are the source of the pandemic, and this kind of thing is sadly just going to be continuing until we really transform the ways that we think and the ways that we live. We've heard over and over again about how deforestation all over the world, and particularly where this pandemic has begun, is the beginning of the pandemic. So there's this clear link between how we are ruining our habitats, and through that, various animals, we're having closer contact with them than we normally would. And through that, we've been having all kinds of diseases run amok, get completely out of control, and we run into things like the pandemic. I'd like to quote from the Bible. This is Genesis 8:22, the end of the Noah story. May it be that as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter will never cease. My name is Ejfa Bernstein. I'm a rabbi and a writer, and I founded Shomrei Adama, Keepers of the Earth, which was the first Jewish environmental organization in the United States. And I've written several books on the intersection of Judaism, the Bible, and ecology. And I'm here to tell you today that we are living in a climate emergency. The state of our climate poses an existential risk for all life on Earth, not just all the creatures, but all of us as well. And I would urge everyone to try to find a way into doing something that's meaningful for you relative to this climate emergency. And that could be things like being grateful, expressing gratitude every day for the earth and our atmosphere, the ability to breathe and to even see all the beauty of the world, for all of the creation that's been given to us. It's all a gift. And to be able to express gratitude is a critical first step to staying conscious in this time of climate emergency. And the second thing I would say is that I hope everyone is able to plant some kind of vegetable, participate in a garden, engage with growing things, because not only will that help the climate, It will also help you to stay positive, and it will sustain you through time.